All right. Right? Good news, you're in the right place. Okay, well, first of all, thank you guys so much for coming out. And thank you all, first and foremost, for making the time on a busy Wednesday afternoon. I can't believe it's Wednesday and it's already November. I just came out of a 2026 planning session, so my brain is not exactly fully, fully executing, but that's okay. One of the things kind of interesting is, as of this time, AI capital markets, an interesting time because, right now we're seeing a lot of opportunity where before in the capital markets world, one of the issues has always been, whether you're raising capital, doing diligence on deals, whether you're trying to find deals, what have you, it's always unstructured data. No deal follows the same pro forma. No deal follows the same, banking transactions and things of that nature. And so it's been traditionally very difficult to automate, any kind of process for that. And so enter AI, where this is the first technology where, quite frankly, it will structure unstructured data. And so now, in many ways, you can actually automate, you can actually leverage historical automation processes and tools with AI such that when the workflow gets to a certain point, it'll actually structure that unstructured data and allow you to continue that automation process. And as long as you have the right human checks and balances, then it's quite compelling. So we're going to go through this presentation. I promise not to bore you by death by PowerPoint. Hopefully you'll find it very, very informative. We will go through a Q&A session, so please try to hold those because hopefully the next slide or so will actually answer those. You might want to ask yourselves, or you might be asking yourselves, who is Oaktech? Well, Oaktech is an AI solutions consulting company and incubator. So it was specifically created to help capital markets companies be more efficient with what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So legal disclaimer. So, we're in the business of bold ideas, but grounded in rigorous compliance and governance, especially when you apply AI to the financial model. So having worked across a lot of regulated sectors and scaled exits, it's really important to understand the need to align innovation with fiduciary duty. So this is legal disclaimer is actually important for many reasons. So a little bit of myself. So I come from humble beginnings. My dad's actually a Lutheran missionary. So I actually was born in Wyoming, but I was only there for like 6 months. I moved every 2 years. I lived in Australia, Sydney, Brisbane, and Adelaide. Went to 3 high schools, 2 junior highs, countless numbers of elementary schools. Went to University of Chicago, was a math major. Put myself through school by taking on the odd IT job. I like to joke around because I could spell IT, and everyone thought the world was going to fall apart in 1998. I was immediately credentialed as an IT management consultant, and so I was getting... My dad couldn't believe it. He was helping me move boxes out of my dorm room, and the fax machine was basically spitting out like 6 job offers a day. And my dad's like, "What the hell's going on?" And so it was really cool. I was an IT consultant for a while. Did some really cool jobs. Was a part of the E-Trade Go Live. Was actually a part of the HP Compaq merger. So it was very cool. And but I realized very quickly that after I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. Which, how many of you have actually read that book, Rich Dad Poor Dad? All right, so pretty much everyone. I realized that I knew nothing about real estate, but that I was going to be 65 years old by the time I paid off my $200,000 of student loan debt. So that really depressed me. I said, okay, I don't know anything about real estate, so what do I do? No, I do know a bunch about IT. So I carpeted the basement of my first house that I had just bought. I put 6 desks down there. I called up all my friends and family. You have to remember, 1998 was the time when there was no DeVry. There was no way of learning IT systems. And so I went on a journey of calling up all the people that I thought were really smart, that could work hard and learn how to do IT. And I basically said, hey, I can't afford to pay you, but what I can do is I can give you room and board. You have to remember, these are all college kids, right? Recently graduated college kids. I can give you room and board, and I can pay you what I can pay you, and I'll give you equity. And so I had 13 people living in a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath house at one point. Luckily, my house was not in an HOA zone. So, the 13 cars that accompanied those people, there's not much they could do about that. But then, we launched the business in December of 1999. It's called Resolve Systems. It's actually still around today. We grew that organically from 0 to 50 million, sold it to Insight Partners in 2012, at which point one of the proudest moments of my life is all 13 people became millionaires that day. So that was really, really cool. So after that, I started a family office. Not too many people knew what a family office was back then, but I started a family office. And then in 2014, between 2012 and 2014, spent a lot of time basically writing down the best practices around how to grow an enterprise software company between 0 and 50 million, which is where I tapped out. And that became ultimately an investment thesis of a private equity fund that I started in 2014 called Domain Capital. And so what was interesting was, as we went from Fund 1 to Fund 3, Fund 1 was a $10 million fund, did about 2.3 times return in a little, around 3 years. Fund 2 was a $32 million fund that started in 2016. That did to about 2.7 times return in a little less than 4 years. And then in 2020, we launched Fund 3. Fund 1, Fund 2 were, 5-year funds, so we finished them a little earlier. Fund 3, we decided, hey, even though our strategy was all focused on buying enterprise software companies between 1 and 10 million, we wanted to give it a little bit longer of a runway. So we said, hey, we're going to do a 10-year fund, and we actually closed $190 million. So that was one of the reasons why I was on the road for 285 days that 1 year, but it was really tough. But as we transitioned into AI, what was interesting was, again, looking at all the aspects of capital markets and where the opportunities were to really automate really kind of came up. And so we decided to launch Oaktech Systems in June of 2024, and that's kind of where all of this kind of started. So from a kind of a flywheel perspective, everyone thinks that capital markets companies are really difficult. They're really complex, right? They're really not. There's not that many moving parts. Yes, there's regulations. Yes, it's important to manage expectations. Yes, you really have to know your numbers, and you have to understand people. You have to have not only high IQ, but you have to have high EQ. Otherwise, it can be a disaster. But what's kind of interesting is that, at the end of the day, if you can find the deals, if you can raise the capital, if you can make sure to invest that capital appropriate to your investment strategy and your experience, then at the end of the day, this flywheel can get automated more and more. And so that's really where our experience is. Whether you're raising capital, whether you're basically doing due diligence, finding deals, or just looking at general business processes to automate using AI, this is really important. And the magic isn't necessarily in one area, but it's actually in the compounding effect between all of these different areas as they kind of work together in unison. So real quick, for those people who haven't necessarily sold a company, how long does a typical founder take? Basically, how long does that state of euphoria last, right? Does it last 6 years, 6 months, 6 days, 6 hours, 6 minutes? So, okay, raise of hands. A, who's going to go with 6 years? All right, you got one. Okay, 6 months. You got a huge check. All right, got it. 6 days. Okay, 6 hours. All right, a little less. How about 6 minutes? Okay, Jessica, you're cheating. The answer is 6 minutes. And you might ask yourself, you just got a whole bunch of money deposited into you, hopefully, those that you structure it correctly. You got a whole bunch of money deposited into your bank account. Why would this only last 6 minutes? I can speak for personal experience. The question becomes, you have worked your butt off to that point, working 100+ hour days, right? You just got a check, and now you go, well, wait a minute. My purpose in life was my business. What do I do now? And that's what happens. And this is a poll, actually, the All In podcast actually did. And it's very true. I remember sitting there, going, okay, now what do I do? And the good news is I like to do these types of things, educating people in the nexus between technology and capital markets, especially entrepreneurs, because it's a very exciting time. But it took a while to figure out what the heck to do at that point. So, okay, there's two main reasons to raise capital. First, if you're a company looking to pay off debt, grow, acquire assets. That's a really important one. This whole capital raising aspect of it, at the end of the day, is super important for those that are looking to do so. And there's ways to do it that you wouldn't necessarily think about doing it kind of the traditional venture capital route. There's ways to do this, actually leveraging fund structures that quite frankly preserve the ability of a founder to stay in control, have the right governance, no matter how much money necessarily is raised, with some exceptions on the extremes ends. The second is if you have an interesting investment thesis, right? So if you're really good at raising, or investing in real estate around a specific strategy, multifamily or industrial or what have you, and you're just looking for capital to bring to market for that investment thesis to create a life of its own, and that's basically raising a fund. Now, I'm going to use the terms capital raising and fundraising kind of interchangeably. Fundraising typically is associated with nonprofits. But in this particular case, it's the same thing as basically raising money. So we built Oaktech around these core principles. So real results, personal outreach, and a system that doesn't rely on gut or feel. And basically, through these methods, we actually have seen our manual processes decrease in the capital raising world about 40 to 60%, depending on the sector. And the sectors that we've actually done this with range from real estate, fintech, services, hospitality, and a lot of others. And the whole idea is to significantly increase the success of your raise of capital. And so we're going to go through this, piece by piece, which will help you hopefully understand what tools to use at what point. So fundraising is a performance sport, okay? So you don't just show up one day and like you're Tiger Woods, okay? That just doesn't happen, okay? At the end of the day, you have to be out there constantly. And if you're not, if you're distracted by other aspects of fundraising or raising capital, then it's not going to be successful. But if you do this on a consistent basis, whether manually or hopefully through using AI tools, you can basically ensure that this is much more efficient and less friction. I always say that before you start doing this on your own, kiss and hug your significant others and family, because you're not going to be on a plane. You're going to be pretty much all absorbed for a very long time, and your friends won't be seeing you for quite some time. But and this isn't for the faint of heart. But with the right support systems and the right AI tools, once you get through this gauntlet, it will literally change your life. This is something that this is a skill that you'll never lose. And again, it's a lot easier today than it ever was. So when you're thinking about raising capital, we talked a little bit about Oaktech. What's the landscape out there? So if you kind of go like, I need help raising capital, at the end of the day, you've got broker-dealers, which really focus on compliance and transactions. There are companies that are out there that, are looking to basically ensure that the product that you have is checking all the right boxes from a regulatory basis. They do basically reach out to folks, but they charge a success fee, and that can be pretty large. And again, in all these situations, success is not guaranteed. Placement agents, on the other hand, rely on networks, so they have a really close networks of individuals to rely upon. But that in and of itself, again, there's high fees associated with it, and you end up doing a lot of the work, no matter kind of where you choose. And so that's really where AI can really help, in terms of driving a lot of more predictable, automated outcomes. So step one is to figure out who it is that you're targeting. So it's really important that you're not meeting with a person. Like if you have a technology company and you're looking to raise capital, you're not meeting with a real estate person, right? It happens more times than not, right? Even if they have necessarily capital to deploy, they may be just the absolute wrong fit. So it's really important to match make, right? And so, step one is basically looking for that digital footprint of these contacts and validate what they're interested in. And believe it or not, you can actually use ChatGPT, because a lot of us leave a lot of interesting kind of breadcrumbs digitally in the ecosystem around what we're actually interested in. And you can actually garner that information by leveraging ChatGPT in this particular case. And so, like for instance, we have a database that we've grown over the years. It's about 200,000 folks of qualified purchasers, and the whole idea behind the system is basically constantly scanning for the interest and how that interest might change. One day, a person might be interested in real estate, but they might have had a bad experience, or markets change, right? This is all dynamic, and the next day, it's like no, I really like AI companies, right? That's kind of the next thing, right? That they're interested in, and so that's really important to understand. Now, there's really three different types of folks that would actually write checks. There's the high net worth folks. These folks, typically can write checks or will commit to a project, and they typically take between 0 and 3 months. They can make decisions relatively quickly. You've got family offices. Family offices are effectively someone has had an exit, and instead of handing the money over to like a Goldman Sachs or Merrill Lynch, they decided to hire staff to make those investments, on behalf of the family. And because there's a little bit more complexity in that typically takes around between 3 and 9 months to actually get commitments. And in those particular cases, data rooms are required. There's a little bit more due diligence that's involved. Institutional investors, and there's really 4 tiers. Institutional investors are like endowment funds, foundations, fund of funds, pension funds. It basically takes about 1 to 2 years. It's very bureaucratic. And one of the things that I had to learn the hard way, because I wasted a lot of time with this, is if, like for instance, if you have a $10 million fund, which is what our first fund was, and you go to say like a CalPERS, and you're looking for that, like $10 million doesn't seem to be a very big check at all to, a huge company, pension company that has, lots of money underneath management. They have rules. They cannot. They are minimum check sizes. In the CalPERS case, I think it's like 200 million or something like that. So their minimum check size is 200 million, and they can't be more than 20% of the fund, right? So you have to be literally $1 billion to sit down with just to have that conversation with that institution in order to even make it make sense, which is something that, again, no matter where you are in the institution, the first thing you need to ask, and again, a lot of this is in the kind of their digital footprint, is what is the average check size, and the reason why the 20% is so important is because if they invest in over 20% of your fund, there's a look-through provision, which basically means all of your investors now become directly their investors that they're responsible for. So to kind of keep that in mind. So especially if you're going to be raising a $10, $20 million, $50 million fund, you're going to be looking at more high net worth family offices as your initial target. And the good news is that those folks typically don't have access to deal flow. And so they're actually very interested in things that will generate a high alpha, especially if the person or the principal behind that investment has a lot of experience in that particular space. So actually, if you can find the right people, then it's quite compelling. Basically, what you want to do then is engage with outreach. So the first kind of step for us is effectively doing educational, right? So once you've you've done the digital matchmaking, then the second step is basically going to them from figuring out what that asset or what that project fits into what asset class. So if there's a real estate project, for instance, it's going to be a part of the real estate asset class. So what you want to do is you want to reach out to them, ideally with educational content, and see if that engagement is going. So I'll give you an example. In phase one, we're doing matchmaking. We actually borrowed the dating algorithm around that, and we tweaked it for investment intent, matching up with projects, right? Now it's about engagement, right? So now you got to put it out there that, hey, look, is this project interesting, right? So we think that this person is interested in this project, but we don't know for sure. What we can tell is that if there's engagement around the educational content, then the engagement score goes up, which case then allows you to engage and solicit directly, with those folks. And this is where you can use things like, again, ChatGPT is really great, but there's a great CRM system that you use ChatGPT. If you have a CRM system that kind of keeps track of all your prospective investors, use ChatGPT to figure out how to automate the workflow around the educational, to create the educational content, right, to push it out there to see engagement, but the CRM system itself should be able to tell you, and I don't care if you're using HubSpot or Salesforce or, our personal favorite is Go High Level, which is a relatively new tool. But you can use that information to create the content, push it out there, see that engagement, and based on that engagement, then take the next step, which is reaching out, through automated workflows directly. So this is so important. So you've gone through the step of matchmaking. You've gone through the step of creating that educational content that's educational oriented. Do not mention your project when you're reaching out educationally, right? Register a domain that has nothing to do with your project, but talks about the things that show your expertise in that particular asset class from an educational perspective. Once you have all that done, then you can actually, and you get the engagement going, then the last step is really reaching out from a solicitation perspective. What is interesting about that particular project? Why is it that this particular alpha can be found nowhere else, right? Why, and a lot of this stuff is based on the story behind that project. As a proven operator, what is so compelling? Like why is it that you did what you did? And how is it that you're going to be able to replicate that? Those are the things that are super interesting, because at the end of the day, people love their families, they hold them close, but they hold their cash really close, okay? And it's really important to gain that trust. And once that trust is garnered, through that educational process, and then basically you start hitting on those buttons from a solicitation perspective around the project, then it's much higher likelihood when you get into a meeting, right? So this is all done before a meeting, right? When you finally get into that meeting, there for a reason, and you're not wasting your time, you're not wasting their time, more importantly, and you can be very efficient with how to actually get folks into your project. And so this is super important. Now, how can you do this? So there's a great tool called manus.im, manus.im. But Manus is a great tool. It's a great, that will go out and actually do a lot of this stuff for you. It'll teach you step by step on how to do this for your particular project, and it'll actually help you refine what it is that is so compelling, because you want to make sure your project is upper quartile, meaning that the project itself will perform well relative to others that are looking for the same dollar in that particular space. So Manus is a great tool. Notion, a lot of you have probably heard about Notion. It's a great way to really tweak that solicitation content above and beyond what we talked about with ChatGPT. And then there's an automation workflow tool called Zapier that is a really great tool as well that can link all of that stuff together so that you can automate this with your CRM integrate with your CRM. Now, from an Oaktech perspective, a lot of that stuff, all this stuff is done automatically, and we have like silent drop-off, detectors and so forth. But from a, doing it yourself perspective, those are the tools that we started to use, and we saw great results. So again, this is the whole idea is, we use AI system to do the matchmaking. We drive engagement to do the scoring. We convert, the opportunities into meetings, and once the meetings are there, then hopefully we actually close folks as well. What we found was that we're basically able to raise capital 50% faster than we had before. We have a 42% conversion rate, which is really high. So if you think about, like, when you finally get into a meeting, 42% of those folks actually end up closing. That's a big deal. For those who've actually tried to raise capital before, that typically doesn't happen. And Oaktech's been around since June of last year, but the AI capital raising solution, fundraising solution, has only been around since January. We have yet to have one project go south. The projects themselves have been extremely good, and not only that, but we're at a 70% higher success rate, or target rate, or achievement rate of the raise versus their target. So those that were expecting 10 million, actually got 17 million in commitment. So it's that kind of performance that is great. So, one of the other things from a stat perspective is, before, if you were a founder, you were sending out all these emails from a manual perspective. You're having meetings with folks that may actually be pitching you for money, that's a very awkward situation when you actually sit down with somebody and you're looking for capital and they're looking for capital, and it's very collegiate, but at the end of the day, it's kind of a waste of time. It typically takes 17 months to raise capital, to have your first close, which is a long time, right? So after, what we found is that the timeline for that first close has dropped to about 7.5 months, including the time that is necessary to actually set up the fund. So if you really look at the timeline dedicated to capital raise, it's around 6 months. And this is a very very reliable process. So we talked a lot about capital raising, but what percentage of capital raise projects are actually successful, right? So the answer is 10 to 20%. It's actually 12.5%. So effectively, 1 in 8 projects are going to succeed at their raise of capital, whether you're raising money for your company or you're raising capital for your fund. And that is a very difficult stat to absorb. These are for first-time, emerging managers, right? First-time capital raisers. So those that have actually done it before, you start to build a track record. Those percentages go up, but it's not exactly successful. So the goal is, how can you do this in a much more efficient manner? And I think AI, we know that AI is the answer to that. So a real quick success story. So there was a gentleman by the name of JC who I've known for quite some time. I moved to California in 2006. I got a mortgage that was unbelievable, and I knew the writing was on the wall that I was going to be upside down on that thing before too long, and sure enough I was. But I live right next to a place called the District, and the District, those of you who have been in the Irvine-Tustin area, right, very large place, has great anchor stores like Whole Foods and Costco, and there's an AMC in there and all that stuff, and there's obviously a lot of small businesses. But JC, who was the most successful general manager for Morton's Corporation, he was actually the corporate wine buyer, decided to start his first restaurant, and he started it within that particular area. And so his first restaurant was launched in 2007. What happened after 2007? Great financial crisis came, right? And every single one of those businesses outside of the anchor stores went out of business, with the exception of the winery restaurant. And so this is when I said, hey, any operator that can set up a restaurant, and if you've ever raised capital, you know that it's not just hard to raise capital, but raising capital for a restaurant is extremely hard. That is probably one of the hardest things that you can do. But anyone that could actually pull that off and not only survive but thrive in that environment, like I want to get to know. So I got to get to know him, and he came to me and he's like, "Look, I've been, and it took me a couple of years to convince him to allow me to invest, and they've, since expanded to Newport, which has done great, and he's a great operator." But these places are 10,000 square feet, and they're basically very large fine dining restaurants. And so he said, when we first started this, everyone was really into fine dining. Now people are looking for more of a casual, more chic experience that's a lot lesser of a footprint. And so he always had this vision around doing this high-end bistro lounge with entertainment. And he said, I just don't know how to do this. So after a while, and I talked to him, probably over the course of a year, we decided that, we were going to help him. He decided that we were going to kind of engage with him to help him structure the fund and then basically raise money for this. And, basically at the end of the day, the whole idea was we were going to make sure that we were going to begin with the end in mind, right? And so, we basically started a couple strategics. Turns out that if you have a very successful a number of the same kind of concept, right? So the numbers in the hospitality space are if you can achieve basically $50 million of combined revenue with 3 to 5 million of EBITDA, and you have more than 5 locations, then there's a lot of private equity capital that's just begging, to deploy because they can take that concept because that has checked the boxes from a scalability perspective to go nationwide, right? And there's interesting kind of backstory. I didn't know this, but those that are familiar with this, there's this restaurant called Panda Express, and everyone knows who a Panda Express is. But did you actually know it was actually a restaurant in Pasadena originally? And the family basically decided one day, you know what, I think we could actually make more money if we made express versions of this, right? And, today they're billionaires, and, many times over. So what was interesting is tapping into all this stuff. I thought technology was lucrative and accretive, but that's interesting. But anyway, long story short, he started his fund. His target was $10 million, 8 locations, so that he could get to those numbers. And we started in August of last year. JC calls me up in December, and he says, Christian, I'm really nervous. I haven't raised any money yet. I said, it takes time. Like, I get asked all the time, like, can you, I just need $2 million, but I need it in 30 days. And I'm like, can't help you. We need to matchmake. That takes time, right? After you matchmake, we need to educate. That also takes time. And then we need to actually approach these people with really eloquent solicitation content to get them engaged. And then it follows the typical 0 to 3 months for high net worth, 3 to 6 months, or 3 to 9 months for family offices to actually get those first subscription documents in. Also, the other thing to know is that fundraising during the holiday seasons is next to impossible. So don't even try. It's not worth your time. Do something else. The third week of November through the end of December is a waste of time for fundraising. Now, I'm not saying it can't be done. I did collect the occasional subdoc, but it felt like I was bashing my head into a brick wall, and I wasn't having any fun during the holidays. The next time, which is even worse, is summer. So it's the third week of June through the end of August. I can't tell you how many times I called up people, and the people. So I could only get about 25% of the people. The people that I could get, half of them were drunk, on holiday. The other half were like, "Why are you calling me and bothering me?" So just don't even try. This is a really great time to regroup mentally, tweak your strategy, create a success story. Be probably very successful. Catch up on your Netflix, take sleep because you're going to need it. But the rest of the time, September through the second week of November, really good time. January 1st, because especially in institutions basically have budgets, right? So this year, this is probably too late in the year, but January 1st, people start coming back and they start writing checks, and that goes around that cycle. And so anyway, JC came to me and he was really worried. In January, we started to get that first check, and it was kind of a lemming effect. It always is. Like once someone comes in, then it's like, oh, sigh of relief. I'm not the first person through the door. This is something that there's calmness. There's security around others that are going to be in there with me, and so this kind of all accelerated. JC did something that I actually wasn't able to achieve, which is. Institutions typically don't invest in your first fund or your second fund. They just don't. It's like first-time fund managers, no. Second time, maybe they got lucky, so I'm going to wait this out. Third fund, okay, now let's talk. So again, if you're going to raise a first fund, then it's going to go back to high net worth family offices. But JC somehow, some way, basically was able to, and I think again, I give credit to the relationships that we have, as well as the targeting system that we have. He has able to close so far 2 institutions, which is great. one for 3.5 million, the other for smaller amount, and then he's got 2 others that are in queue. That's a huge, kind of celebration to, I believe, the planning that went into making sure that this was compelling, because there's cash flow associated with this particular product, with this project, but there's also a high chance of it actually being very, high return of capital too, which again you don't really typically see in the hospitality space. But he's got the combination of both because he's such a good operator. But long story short, basically, as of today, he's got 15.3 million of signed subscription documents. His target was 10, and he's got 27 million that's soft circled. So what do I mean by that? There's basically a $12 million gap that has been verbally committed above and beyond. So he is doing very, very well. And he's actually, his first location opens up in first week of February in Palo Alto, next to the Stanford at the Simon Mall. Second location actually opens right over there. Right next to Ballast Point. And third is going to be in CDM, and fourth is going to be in, I think, Century City and OC Vibe and so forth and so on. So he's quite busy. Otherwise, he would be with us today. But that's JC, and I think he's very happy kind of with what we're doing, and he is one of many projects. Right now we're doing about 17 projects right now from a fundraising and fund incubation perspective. So we've been very honored to have that trust, because from an operator perspective, we do dig into a lot of how it is that you do what you do, so that you're set up for success when you actually raise money for your company, or you start your fund. That's fine. All right, thank you again, guys.